Ottawa says Canada finally has a balanced budget. But here's the truth, they're still borrowing $280 billion. That's like saying you've paid off your credit card after moving the balance from one card to a new one. It's not balance, it's branding. And that trick is costing Canadians every single month. But before you panic, let's look at the full picture. Yes, it's debt disguised as spending, but it's also a signal because buried inside this so called balanced budget are opportunities for Canadians who know how to read between the lines. That's what this episode is really about, turning government bets into a personal advantage. The government didn't suddenly start saving money. They just moved a massive chunk of spending into a new category that they like to call investments. That accounting trick makes the books look cleaner without actually cutting what they're spending. So if everything's balanced, why do groceries, mortgages, and gas still cost more? Because this balance exists on paper, not in real life. And yet, Ottawa's calling this year's plan Canada Strong. It could be as easily called Canada Big. Big promises, big spending, big debt, but also big bets. Build more homes, build more infrastructure, build a stronger economy. And that's the playbook. Behind it all, $78 billion in new debt this year alone, nearly double what they projected last year with a different government. Bold? Absolutely. Risky? F yeah. But the belief in Ottawa is simple. We bet big now, win big later. I talked to a family in Langley last week. Both parents, they're working full time, two kids in hockey, a mortgage renewal coming up this summer. They heard the government say the budget is balanced, but their wallet is saying otherwise. And that's the gap between the headline and real life. And today, we're going to close that gap. We're going to break down what's real, what's smoke and mirrors, and how you can actually use the new rules to get ahead. Let's go. The government split spending into two parts. The first is operating, so your everyday programs and services. The second is capital, long-term projects like housing, roads, transit. When Ottawa says the budget is balanced, they're only talking about the operating side. The capital side, the one that can borrow, is still running up $280 billion in new debt. Put both together, and Canada is still borrowing about $125 billion a year. So that balanced budget headline, it's really just accounting language, not real savings. It's like moving your groceries, gas, and Netflix bill into a long-term investment category just so your household budget looks better. The debt, it didn't disappear. It just gets changed with labels. And that's sadly what Ottawa did. So what does that mean for regular Canadians? It means inflation is going to stay sticky. It means taxes don't drop nearly as much as you'd hope. And it means the government's betting heavily on growth, not cuts. The upside, if you build, invest, or create, Ottawa's betting on you. Over $25 billion is going straight into housing, faster builds, more supply, and hopefully a little relief on prices, although that's far from guaranteed. For the first time in decades, more than 50% of new housing starts are purpose-built rentals. Just a few years ago, that number was closer to 10%. That's a seismic shift, and it's being fueled by one key change. The Canada Mortgage Bond Program, the main funding vehicle for multi-unit housing, is being expanded from $60 billion to $80, and the entire $20 billion increase is going directly to rental construction. That's huge. More CMB funding means more liquidity for lenders, more financing for developer, and more purpose-built rentals on the ground. But here's the flip side. Owner-occupied housing starts are dropping. It's in the news. You've seen it everywhere. Last year's CMB increase was split between owner-occupied and multi-unit projects. This year, it's all going to multi-unit. So while rental supply rises, single-family housing, it may stay scarce. And that scarcity keeps prices supported. It's simple supply and demand economics. That's the trade-off in this so-called Canada Strong plan. Now layer that onto the rest of the budget. There's $115 billion for infrastructure, so that's your roads, ports, pipelines, transit, all that stuff. That matters because infrastructure, it's going to fuel growth. Growth fuels housing demand, and housing demand, it keeps our mortgage pipelines full for brokers. There's also $30 billion for defense spending. You think, what does that have to do with mortgages? but that means construction jobs, long-term contracts, and stable employment, all of which trickle right back into the housing and borrowing power. And one more big one, a super deduction for business investing in growth. Think more employers, more jobs, and ultimately more people able to buy and build homes. So while the budget is hiding spending with creative math, it also hands opportunities to those who know how to use them. Let's break down where the strategy lives in all of this. Starting July 2025, the lowest federal income tax rate drops from 15% to 14%. That saves the average family around $400 a year. Not life-changing, but here's how to make it matter. Take that $400 and put it straight towards your mortgage or line of credit. At today's rate, that small move can save roughly $1,000 in interest over time. It's a small win, but they compound fast when interest rates are high. The underused housing tax is gone starting in 2025. No more annual filings, no more surprise bills. But if you had to file for past years, those filings still count. So make sure your paperwork is clean and your ducks are in a row. The Bear Trust reporting rule is delayed again, now starting in 2026 with filings due in 2027. That gives you time to fix ownership setups before penalties are going to hit. For builders and investors, there's even more upside. If you build something useful, the government wants to help. Manufacturers and processors can now write off up to 100% of new equipment and buildings in the first year. That's massive for cash flow. For rental housing, the write-offs jump from 4% to 10%. To qualify, your project must have at least 4 units or 10 rooms, be mostly long-term rentals, and start construction after April of 2024. That's real incentives, not fluff. This is Ottawa rewarding builders, not just talkers. And that ties into the government's bet. If the private sector builds faster, the economy grows stronger. But it's still a gamble. Big spending, big risk. If rates rise or growth stalls, that $78 billion in new debt becomes an even bigger problem. And that's the fine print under Canada Strong. Here's what frustrates me. Politicians, they sell the word balance like it's good budgeting. But no household could ever get away with this kind of accounting. Imagine telling your wife or husband, hey, hon, we balanced our budget right after maxing out a new line of credit. That's what this budget really is. But instead of getting mad, just get strategic. Find the silver lining. The rules just change, and if you know how to play them, you can win. The CRA is also tightening contractor rules. If your workers act like employees, they'll be treated like employees, and that can mean back CPP, EI, and income tax penalties. So now is the time to review your agreements and fix any messy contracts out there. There's also some good news for innovators. The research and development tax credit, it's now bigger. Businesses can claim up to $6 million in qualifying expenses and even include equipment costs. That means more cash back for companies actually building or testing new ideas. The carbon tax ends April 1st, 2025, thank God. Lower fuel costs, but no more quarterly rebates. For small businesses, any rebates from before stay tax-free. Zero emission vehicle write-offs, they still exist, but the fast version is being phased out. And a few corporate loopholes are now closing. No more year-end gymnastics to speed up refunds. Refunds now happen when dividends are paid, not before. The capital gains exemption stays at $1.25 million for small business shares. That's a solid win for owners planning on a sale of their business. The extra entrepreneur's incentive, gone. And that's fine. It was too complicated and barely used, and no one really understood it. Here's the bottom line. This budget, it isn't really about balance. It's about building. It's about rewarding the people who take actions, the ones who build homes, create jobs, and drive innovation. If you're waiting for prices to drop, you'll be disappointed. If you learn to use these new incentives, potentially you come out ahead. Here's your game plan. Use your small tax cut to strengthen cash flow, pay down higher interest debt first. If you're an investor, pivot towards purpose-built rental and long-term housing because that's where the money is. And that's where the biggest tax write-offs and funding incentives live. If you're a business owner, review your company structure, your contractor relationships, and R&D opportunities before the CRA does. And if you had UHT or trust filing issues, fix them now before the penalties grow. The government may be playing with the numbers, but you can play with the strategy. Reclassify your money into assets that build wealth, because in today's economy and every economy, strategy always wants to beat rate. And if you want to take that one step further, check out my last video, the 5 biggest mortgage mistakes Canadians make and the questions you should be asking before you renew, refinance, or buy. I'll link it right up here in the show. Go watch that next, and it'll change the way you think about your mortgage forever.